Hi there. So the question is, are operations really worth the time and energy? Are they cost effective? Let's find out. With the new Stellaris update, Nemesis, we have a whole host of new actions available to us in the espionage screen. So we have, at the beginning of the game, 9 actions available. As the game goes on, there are a total of 13 possible actions. These actions range from gathering information, which allows you to increase your intel on a target empire, to acquiring assets, extorting favours, sabotaging starbases, and, in the very late game, sparking the Galactic Rebellion. Each espionage operation has a specific energy cost and a monthly upkeep to continue progressing down the mission. As well as that, in order to have a spy network on an empire and to commence an operation, you have to have an envoy assigned to that empire in the Build Spy Network task. So what are the costs we have in order to complete an operation? Well, there is the opportunity cost of having an envoy assigned to the Build Spy Network rather than being assigned to your federation, or to improve relations with another empire, or to increase your diplomatic weight in the galactic community. On top of that, we have the fixed energy cost of beginning an operation, as well as the monthly energy cost of maintaining that operation. The first operation is the Gather Information operation. This operation has a base cost of 400 and costs 4 energy credits per month to maintain. It has the lowest operational difficulty, a base of 2, and then modified by your relative encryption. So it should be a fairly easy operation to finish quickly, and that means you shouldn't have to spend too much time on the upkeep. Now when you do finish it, you're going to gain 5 intel and you'll reduce your infiltration level by 5. What this is going to do in the short term is increase the information you have about the target empire, hopefully taking you over one of the thresholds for intel, which usually are every 10, so at 80, 90, etc. But it will also reduce the resting rate of your intel. So for instance, if your infiltration level is at 45 and your intel is at 45, you won't be losing any intel per month. But if you did this operation, you would increase your intel level to 50 and reduce your infiltration level to 45, which would mean you'd probably have some new information in regards to intel, but you'd start declining in intel every month back down to your new infiltration level. So in terms of whether this is cost effective, if you really are desperate to get over a little intel hurdle or barrier, then it's only 400 energy. It might be quite useful. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're about to go to war, and it's going to put you from 39 to 40, and that will allow you to see a low level of military intel, which will give you the relative fleet power of your enemy fleets and the location of star bases. So at that level, absolutely, it's probably worth it. But at other levels, if you're not going to go over one of these barriers every 10 intel, then I probably wouldn't recommend taking it. Next, we have the Spark Diplomatic Incident operation. Now what this is going to do is it's going to cause a negative relations penalty between the target nation and a random neighbouring nation. It's going to cost you 625 energy credits and a further 5 per month to maintain. Aside from its uses in some single player games, just to cause a little bit of tension between neighbours, the modifier it can give is very small. I think it's -60, and it can be mitigated by the AI or the civilization if you do it to a player, choosing to go with an option where they, for instance, have to not move their envoy for a number of months or something like that. So it might not even carry off. Overall, I think Diplomatic Incident really isn't worth it. Prepare Sleeper Cells has a cost of 900 energy, a monthly cost of 6, and a base difficulty of 6 as well. What this operation allows you to do is it allows you to reassign your envoy to a different task without losing any of your level of infiltration, meaning your spy network will not diminish in the target nation. This is a really good action Basically, you're paying to get an additional envoy, in essence, after you've built up your spy network somewhere. This is an essential operation, though the modifier that stops the reduction in your infiltration only lasts around 10 years. So be warned that it doesn't keep your spy network there forever. Next is the Acquire Asset operation. This operation, if successful, allows you to get an asset in the target empire. Now, assets allow you to increase your infiltration level in the target empire beyond that which your technology would normally allow. So if you want to build up quite a large spy network in another player's empire or another empire in general, you need to be acquiring as many assets as you can. Each asset will increase your maximum infiltration by 5. They can also be assigned to operations where they have the relevant skill to reduce the time it takes to complete that operation. Acquire asset costs 900 energy and 6 energy per month. If you need to increase your spy network above a certain size and you are being hindered by the other empire's technology level, encryption or decryption, this is an essential operation to use. The Extort Favours operation has a cost of 1,225 energy. On completion, you gain favours with the target empire. Now, in any situation where you can normally gain favours through trade and diplomacy, that would be preferable to this operation. You only gain between 1 and 3 favours if you're very lucky. Overall, the cost effectiveness here is just very low. Unless you're playing a multiplayer game where someone won't give you favours, or you are trying to gain favours with an empire that is hostile to you and at war with you, this action isn't useful. On top of that, the amount of time it will take means that you're really only going to get a few favours over a long period of time. It's going to take you somewhere in the region of a few years to complete this operation, meaning over a 10-year period, if you're trying to pass a resolution, you won't have enough time to get enough favours from this empire unless it's very close to pass that resolution. So overall, it could be useful, but most of the time I'd recommend avoiding it. The Smear campaign is a very interesting operation. It has a base cost of 1,225, and to all intents and purposes, it is the same as the Spark diplomatic incident. But in this operation, you can choose which empire has the diplomatic incident with the target empire you are spying on. And an important thing to remember as well is to make sure when you do this operation, you untick the Commence When Ready box. If you don't do this, you won't get the option to pick which empire you want to target the Smear campaign towards. However, it does have all of the same issues that Spark Diplomatic Incident had. There are options in the event chain that allow the opposing empire to circumvent the negative malice to opinion. Where could this be useful? So when you are trying to break up two people who are defensively allied, it could be useful then. You're probably going to have to initiate it quite a few times to actually break the two empires apart. And on top of that, it'll be most effective if you are using it on both empires that you want to diplomatically harm. What else could it be used for? Well, it could be used to break up a federation. Will that work though? So I've looked at the maths of it and I plotted some nice graphs to illustrate why it is so difficult and time consuming to try and break a federation apart. Now, imagine there is a federation with only 2 members. They're going to have some pacts with each other. They're going to have some trust. That is going to be a base trust of somewhere in the region of around 300, plus the federation bonus is another 50 each on top of that, along with any other modifiers from improved relations or any events or anything like that, which puts us at around, let's say, 600 for the initial relations between the two empires in the federation that we want to split up. So it is going to take us, assuming we can run this operation to completion once every year, which is hellishly fast. I don't actually think that's possible unless you have a whole host of assets saved up in the right categories. If you could do that, you could split the federation up with only 8 successful completions of this operation, assuming every completion of this operation gave the -60 negative modifier to their opinion of each other. That would take, at 1 year each, you'd end up taking around 8 years to do that. Now, if we had, on the other hand, 3 years between each operation being successful and adding the modifier, which is something I managed having very high relative encryption and completing the operation, constantly trying to complete the operation both in the target empire and the other empire in the Federation. I was averaging 1 negative malice every roughly 3 years. It's going to take around 25 to 27 years to break up that Federation. Assuming that we only are looking at the costs of this, that's going to be a cost of 26,250 energy in the startup cost for the operation and the monthly costs of maintaining it. And I've also assumed that 1 in every 2 times I've run the operation, it's either failed, been discovered, or the AI has chosen to go with the outcome where they don't take a relationship penalty hit, they have taken the envoy hit or something like that. So overall, as you can see, it is very, very expensive to try and knock apart a Federation, and it's going to take a very long time. Now let's say you only manage to apply this negative malice every 5 years. Well, at that rate, you will never break apart the Federation because of the yearly increase to relations, the yearly modifier by which this negative malice diminishes, which is +1 a year. At a certain point, if you're only able to complete this every 5 years, you're going to have to keep checking the opinions map mode to see if they have taken the -60 relation malice or not. So that opinion map mode is going to be really important for knowing how effective you've been. But as I say, if you're completing this on average once every 5 years, you will never manage to break that Federation apart. So overall, this is a very, very difficult tool to use well. It's very expensive. It's not really a good operation. I wouldn't recommend trying to use it unless you're trying to go with a role play or something like that. Its overall effectiveness, only applying a -60 after, on average, probably around 2 to 3 years of attempting to complete it, is not going to be so great. The Steel Technology operation has a cost of 1600 energy and has a base difficulty of 8, so it is going to take quite a while to finish this operation without using an asset. Now, the upsides for it are fantastic, however. You can find the option for a technology that your opponent has researched already, along with getting 30% of the research points towards that. And if you don't get a technology, but you still complete it successfully, you can get 1,000 research points in a random category. Something to note here is that you can unemploy all of your bureaucrats, your administrators, to massively increase your empire sprawl just before finishing this operation. And that will mean the 30% technology you get will be 30% of that new very high technology cost. So when you re-employ all your bureaucrats again a few seconds later, you probably will instantly complete that technology. So that's just a little something to note that you can do if you are wanting to cheese the game a bit. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't think that's rules as written, not rules as intended. Ironically, this is a much better operation if your technology level is ahead of your opponent, because what it'll mean is you'll have a higher encryption and decryption. You can complete it faster, so it won't cost you as much monthly, and at the end of it, you're still going to get a technology you haven't researched yet. So in a lot of ways, this is the best operation, and I would recommend trying to complete it as often as possible to increase your technology and increase the gap between you and other empires, or decrease it if you're behind them. So the Sabotage Starbase operation has a cost of 2,025 and a very high base difficulty of 9, so it's going to take quite a while to complete. At the end of that, you might be rewarded with damaging a single building on the starbase or a single module, and possibly, if you pay an extra 2 volatile motes, destroying 1 defensive platform. Now, that overall is not really worth it. If you took that energy and you bought alloys with it instead at a rate of, you know, 4 or 5 energy to an alloy, which would be a reasonably high price in the galactic market, you'd be able to output some ships that would have equivalent firepower to trying to do this. On top of that, you don't know exactly when it's going to complete. It's really just not worth it. It's an interesting idea, absolutely, but overall, it's not something I'd recommend trying or doing. And finally, Armed Privateers has the same issues as Sabotage Starbase. On top of that, people have been finding it a little buggy. They've been finding they didn't even sometimes spawn the Privateers, so I'm not quite sure what's been going on there, but it's definitely not something I'd recommend doing. If you want to damage your opponent, I would probably recommend attacking them directly, or trying to disrupt them in the Galactic Senate, the Galactic Community, or waiting to be able to use the Crisis Beacon operation. Now, Crisis Beacon is even stronger. It's got a difficulty of 12, and you need to have an infiltration level of 80. So you have to be actually quite advanced relative to your opponent, or have quite a few assets there. Now, if you do that, you can summon the Crisis to come over and beat them up. Well, if you're so much more advanced than your opponent, you probably can fly in there militarily and take them out. So again, the Crisis Beacon is another interesting idea, but I don't quite think the effectiveness is there at this stage. It might, you know, these actions are going to get changed up. It might be useful at a later time. The other 3 operations I'm not really going to cover, other than to say that they all do something which you cannot do through any other means. The Spark Rebellion, weaken Imperial authority, or target seditionists. That's basically the only options you have for the Imperial interaction, other than passing and repealing laws in the Galactic Senate. So they may not be effective in terms of how much they cost, but they're from an RP perspective, they're interesting and they're useful. Sparking Rebellion is definitely something you want to do in a playthrough if you have the opportunity. So in summary, Prepare Sleeper Cells is a fantastic operation. Gather Information can be useful, but rarely. Spark Diplomatic Incident, I wouldn't recommend. Acquire Asset is essential if you need to increase the infiltration level of a nation which has got some sort of negative modifier against you, or is simply equivalent to you. Smear Campaign can be useful in very specific circumstances, but overall is highly ineffective in terms of its cost and will take you a long time to complete if you are attempting to break apart a cohesive federation of even just 2 members. Let's not get into, if there are 3 or 4 members, the number of different opinion modifiers you'd be having to change across there to get a single member thrown out. Sabotage Starbase, Armed Privateers, and Crisis Beacon, while all interesting ideas, at this point I don't really think I can recommend trying to complete them as operations. Steel Technology, on the other hand, an essential operation you should be completing as often as you have it available. I'm thinking about releasing a short version of this as well, another short. If that's something you'd like to see, just comment down below in the description, if you'd like to see a summary like that. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like. If you have any other comments or any feedbacks, please leave a comment. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe. In addition, if you'd like to support my channel on Patreon, there's a link down below. I hope you've enjoyed this video.